Awesome. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining the ultimate guide to LED volumes. I'm Adam Poole. I'm the Director of Technical Operations at Meptik. We are the services arm of Disguise, who we have Addy.
Yeah, hi, everyone. I'm Addy with Disguise. We're a global provider of hardware and software for virtual production stages all over the world. If you don't know us, we also do tons of concert touring, broadcasts, live events, location-based experiences. If you've seen that giant round thing, the sphere outside, that's powered by Disguise as well. And shout out to our team back there. Hey, everybody. So if you have questions about Disguise after the panel, just go approach any one of them.
Hi, and my name is Carlos Perez. I'm also from Disguise. My role in Disguise is a virtual production specialist. So I am a D3 operator that specializes in virtual production workflows and LED stages.
Cool. So we wanted to walk you through the ultimate guide, as we said, and virtual production, LED volumes can kind of come in many forms. And so one of the things we wanted to walk through today is talk about what goes into creating the ultimate volume, what you would want to think about as you embark on creating your own, looking to utilize the volume, what have you. And then Addy and Carlos can kind of provide some context for what's happening out in the industry, what we're seeing in terms of trends, where things are going, and just overall some anecdotes about, what the best in the business are utilizing this new creative tool for. So the current state of virtual production, I think in the past few years, there has been a trend to big, large volumes, right? The Mandalorian, Netflix has done some very big productions on very big stages. But the stages most people will use are much smaller, right? They're either in a corporate setting, they're in a classroom setting, or they're, on a stage that's a much smaller size. So,
That's correct. So the world probably has enough of those extra large stages. They certainly exist. And there's only so many movies on the planet that are needing those stages of that size and that day rate. For everybody else that's doing, episodic work, commercial work, that middle of that pyramid, that tier 2, that stuff keeps growing for us. And we're finding that we're seeing a lot more demand in stages maybe, 50 feet or so in diameter, just exploded in demand.
Yeah, and I'm finding in productions and talking to people within the industry is the importance of pre-visualization, where if you have, depending on whether it's episodics or film, a lot of pre-visualization comes ahead of time. And with that, the more you're prepared, the more time you have to be creative, and where maybe with that previs, you might not need those massive stages. Maybe based on your shot design, camera movement, you might be able to cleverly have smaller stages, smaller sets, utilizing the most out of a small square foot. A much easier, your producers won't be mad at you, essentially, with enough preparation.
Yeah, and just real quick on that, the pixel pitch on the panels is also getting smaller. So you can actually put cameras much closer to the panel, which means you're going to need less real estate, which means you're going to need a smaller, you can get away with a smaller stage. So there's a lot of things that are dictating the size and shapes of the stages at the moment. It's a super dynamic thing and very exciting at the same time.
So for those who aren't familiar, what is an LED volume comprised of? Very high level. It's your LED tiles. It's your camera and your tracking. It is your media server that is powering all of the pixels. And then it is, the cameras that you're shooting with on top of that. And so again, depending on the size of the volume, all of these are decisions that, can go in different directions. So we're typically seeing 3 types of volumes. You have a curved wall, and that's best for sort of seamless production. You've got a flat wall. That's great for cost-effective corporate environments, what have you. And then you've got the type that have a ceiling, a floor element, or what we call auxiliary or wild walls. And those would use for car processing shots. You'd use for spill, light spill, things like that. I mean, guys, are there other sort of, what are you typically seeing out in the field right now?
Yeah, I mean, going into like car processing, which I think around now because of the evolution of virtual production, we're seeing that car process shots are sort of straying away from green screen into LED volume work because it's such a specific workflow, and visual effects. Green screen requires such like a heavy burden in terms of like work and crew. Like we're finding that LED volumes with 2D playback is like the perfect solution when it comes to these type of like, especially for episodics. Like imagine all those episodes of Seinfeld. If they had an LED volume, it would have been significantly easier to get all those jokes with George Costanza. And we're seeing the certain specific like iterations of car process stages in itself is very interesting because you don't need a massive curved wall to shoot a driving shot. All you need is one LED panel right behind, especially if it's like an interior facing the driver and passenger. And all you're seeing is essentially rear projection, how we used to do in the old days, like with the old 007, North by Northwest, and so on. So you have these, a simple little 2D like LED wall just directly for the mirror, for the rear view mirror, would get that job done. And then to evolve more, if you want more exterior shots of the car, you could have sort of suspended ceiling panels to get that reflection capture, that lighting outside. You could have like a wild wall that's just parallel to that back LED wall, and that's giving you that front reflection on the hood of the ceiling. It's really, really cool how modular specific to like car process shots are and so on. So it's all about shot design and when it comes to your setup and process.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing too is it's important whether you are an instructor at an educational institution, whether you are a director who is working on one of these volumes, to kind of come prepared in the pre-production or in the planning phase for what do you want to do on the volume, right? Like showing up, every volume is not the same, and it's important to know how you want to utilize the tool before you set foot on it to get the most out of it. And, I think, Addy, you can kind of speak to that as well.
I mean, look, the volumes only get more elaborate as the production is more elaborate. So taking on the classic sort of curve wall shape, I've seen some productions even exaggerate that curve so much that it starts to look like a horseshoe. And generally they tend to do that when you have to absolutely immerse an entire set into that volume. And then there's even volumes that are shaped like a J. So that's what, you have a tracking shot and you're tracking this thing, or an actor across this wall, and then finally they end up in a location and a situation you have to act. The important thing here is not so much the shape, but how the stage is actually built, because you want the stage to be modular and maneuverable very, very quickly. So if you have a film TV shoot this week and then next week you want to switch over to a broadcast shoot, you should be able to do that with your system. And these are some of the things that we're improving on and learning from our customers. This guy certainly does this really well, and we're seeing the market sort of adapt to this as well.
And then like to touch too, I like to think of when it comes to all this technology, like you could get like kind of intimidated with all these new technologies, all these new workflows coming up. But I like to think of it as a sort of like, we're essentially just modernizing traditional filmmaking workflows from rear projection, practical sets. Like it's all the same foundations, and understanding the history of filmmaking, how it's made, allows us to improve on that workflow and not feel so like intimidated by it either.
So I guess another aspect too about volumes is the type of production you want to do on it. So, okay, you've figured out your physical configuration, but also is the virtual configuration. So there's 2.5D, which is really just a way of using traditional 2D content at various planes. And then there's full virtual production, as we call it, set extension, where you're inside an environment like Unreal and you can move through the environment on the space. And so maybe you guys can kind of talk about a bit about the difference between the two.
Yeah, I could sort of educate on the 2.5D thing. So this is a buzzword. You hear it a lot in virtual production. What it is really simple. If you can picture cardboard cutouts of things that are done in layers. So in Photoshop, you have layers, and you can bring those layers into an LED wall. And the advantage here is instead of building a highly complex 3D scene that takes weeks and thousands of dollars, you can do this very, very quickly with images, pre-existing videos, and get the same 3D effect. Parallax. It's all about parallax. When you're moving a camera around, especially on a dolly, if that background is flat, it's going to look fake. Your eyes are going to know that it's fake. So you want to introduce some type of parallax so in camera it's more realistic.
Yeah, because I like to think of 2.5D where like 2D playback, like driving process shots, like they work fine as long as the camera's like static. But as soon as that camera moves, like that staticness sort of breaks the immersion of the scene. 2.5D is great because it allows you to sort of go beyond that limitation of like original 2D static images And then you could even take it a step forward before even going into like full 3D, where, for example, common 2.5D workflows such as new compositing with projection mapping, 3D projection for tracking shots. You could create environments like 2.5D just like that, import them into like Disguise, and you have sort of that sort of rear like orientation, those normals, that sort of depth that you're creating with those meshes, applying to Disguise, and you're getting sort of that close to 3D mesh as possible without essentially like acquiring heavy render nodes or render machines to render a full 3D scene. It's all about being clever and seeing what you could get out. Less is more in terms of like certain workflows, and 2.5D I feel like is one of those, like less is more when it comes to the process. And also there is a lot of talented Photoshop digital map painters out there that I think 2.5D, 2.75D that could really take advantage of that certain workflow. Because right now with the new iteration, we're kind of like still in I like to say the sort of early adolescent stages of virtual production, where we're still learning a lot of how it works, and still like the pool of talent when it comes to Unreal artists is still very demanding. We still require a lot. However, we do have a massive pool of just very talented 2D map painters that could really take advantage and could really bring that forward without having to involve in Unreal and 3D.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think 2.5D is the real workhorse, right? Like Unreal gets a lot of the accolade, but like 2.5D is still used far more than probably an Unreal environment.
Yeah. And I just want to note that because we saw such a spike in 2.5D content, we went ahead and built an entire tool around it. So in Disguise, it's actually super easy to put the layers together, separate the layers by depth, and then bring it in all as a single cohesive asset.
Cool. So what do we got? So next is content mapping, right? So we've got our volume. We've decided on our 2.5 or our Unreal workflow. And from here, we've got to map the content across all of the surfaces. This is really where I think the media server that's driving all of this is the most powerful, right? Being able to push all of these pixels as fast as possible is super important. And so I think, it would help to know what you guys are seeing out in the field in terms of, what's happening.
Yeah, look, even if what we consider some stage to be small, that's still a ton of pixels, right? So if you think about your TV at home, it's 4K. And if we're pushing something like 8K, that's 4 times the amount of pixels that's needed from your TV. And it all has to be real time at a certain frames a second. So there's an intense demand on the hardware, on the performance of the hardware. And this is why there is a difference sort of in the type of construction and chassis and GPUs that a hardware consists of. And clearly you get sort of what you pay for. So we're seeing a lot of the industry sort of move away from those science project, those DIY systems into something that's actually more enterprise and more capable, stuff like Disguise and so on.
Yeah, and then going into content mapping in a more like on the production itself, one of the benefits of like using a media server such as Disguise is all content is like sort of created depending on your content. Say we have 360 video plates from. We have.
Oh, I think you're covering, the RF.
Hello, test. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so sorry about that. So for example, you have, when it comes to driving process shots, we have our traditional driving plates, for example, drivingplates.com, where you're getting a series of 4K video plates from each portion, depending on the nodal point of the cameras. Mapping that into an LED wall, you could either have that pre-stitched ahead of time with your visual effects artist, stabilized, or you could stitch that in real time with Disguise as well, giving you more freedom to move around depending if the DP wants you to move the content a little bit left or right, play with the perspective. You could do that. Or you could get full 360 plates, such as Plate Pros, where you can see some of our booths are playing them as well, where you get full 360 videos that are played in real time, and you could actually have specific spherical projections in Disguise that you could project out, sort of like a balloon just exploding, and it's just exploding content all across the LED screens within the content. So it's really important to understand like how your content is rendered out in terms of like what's the machine they're using, what type of camera, the lens distortion, the values, so that you know exactly how it should be mapped out to the wall, your ceiling, understanding like the angle of your ceilings, your wall to wall, so that when you map it out, it doesn't look weird to the eye or the camera perspective isn't incorrect. So those are things that are very important. Those are workflows that we learn from our experience in live events when it comes to planning out these LED content and mappings for live shows, such as the Sphere here in Vegas for U2, Taylor Swift, Beyonce. These are the foundations of what we've been able to do for our content mapping and workflows that naturally works for these type of content for Disguise, such as driving plays, 2.5D, and so on.
And I think whether it's an audience member at the Sphere or an actor who's standing in a volume, reacting to a scene, that's what really makes it a different element than green screen, right? Green screen is added in post-production. This allows an actor, for example, to react to, an alien spaceship above their head on a ceiling plate, so to speak, right? And so these are the kind of things that we are finding in the industry are driving the virtual production stages instead of the older way of doing things.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's not kid around. The biggest thing that's driving virtual production is saving money, right? Studios are ruthlessly efficient businesses. And so when they see a tool that saves them time is money, they're going to look at it. So this is why, the big streaming giants like your Netflix, your Amazon, your Disney, they're all looking at virtual production, utilizing it already. And we're going to continue to see that push downwards into some of the smaller spaces, smaller studios. So we're seeing that exponential growth come in from the last couple of years to now.
So potential strategies, I guess, for amplifying your use of a volume. It's, we talked about educational institutions using this as a teaching tool to train the next generation of operators, directors, storytellers, things like that. But there's also a whole host of reasons to use this in a corporate environment, right? Training on large, heavy equipment that works in extreme environments, things like that. And so, I'd love to hear from you guys too, what you're seeing in the field for the way people are utilizing content on these types of stages.
Yeah. So one of the most exciting spaces for me using virtual production outside of film and TV is commercials. Look, somebody who watches a Super Bowl for the commercials, I love commercial works. And I think a lot of young creators, young directors get their footing using commercial work. So they're using it super creatively. This is a tool for creatives. It at the end of the day, it has to serve a higher purpose of making a vision come true that wasn't possible before. And it's certainly happening in the commercial space.
Like one of the examples that I want to give is actually I visited 2 days ago. I actually went to one of the clubs here in Vegas, as you do here. A little too late for my curfew, but still, it was one of the clubs that was run by Disguise. It was using Disguise, and we were lucky enough to visit the operator on her booth as she was controlling. The club was Zeus. It was in Resorts World. And something that was really fascinating is they had about 16 different LED panels just floating on top, all controlled within Disguise. And the operator was using Comfy UI, sort of this AI generative software, and she was writing in prompts, and those prompts were being fed into Disguise. And you see all the LED volumes have these generic sort of 15 frames per second sort of very stylized AI content being played, matching the beats per minute of the DJ while he was playing. And that was something that was super fascinating for me because when it comes to AI, it's very different when it comes to the workflow that you're trying to do in terms of film and episodics, much more sort of storyboarding. That was such a unique way of using something like that I haven't even thought of because I'm not a club person. You may think based on my style, but I don't club at all. But seeing that sort of workflow and using the same tools that I use every day, for something else entirely being used in such a unique way was really inspiring for me. I want to go and try that in our stage at home. I want to try to recreate a nightclub there in the middle of our stage. So it's really, really cool how it's, learning this type of workflow and software, really opens up a lot of doors that you don't expect. Not just, we're all here because we love film and TV. We love the movies. We love Jurassic Park, The Creator. We love Dune Part 1 and Part 2. God, I saw it 4 times in theaters on IMAX. It's the best. But then even though with that, I'm finding new love for new different workflows using the same tools. It is a really cool experience. So being educating and finding these workflows and just testing them and playing them, you really it opens up a lot of doors in terms of the creative space using technology.
Yeah, especially when you take traditional set pieces and incorporate them into the LED volume too, right? It's it's amazing how hard it is to tell where the real ends and the virtual begins, so to speak, right? And so I think that's what's also fascinating, is seeing how young and old creatives alike are taking this sort of same fundamental building blocks and approaching it in very different ways, from AI-driven content to, the kind of example we have on the screen here where, some set deck was brought in and blended seamlessly with the virtual background. So that, in a big picture sense is, the world of LED volumes. There's obviously so much more that goes into it. It is very much a choose your own adventure type of production. But we're sort of emerging, I think, from the science experiment age into a more standardized set of tools, standardized way of working. And so, with that, I guess I'd leave final thoughts for you guys and where you see this going in the future.
Yeah. So a lot of people ask me, how do I even start? Where do I learn this stuff? And we have an excellent program. I see somebody in the front stage who's taken it. Lou, raise your hand. Yeah, that's him. So he can attest. The Virtual Production Accelerator is Disguise's training regimen. It's a 3-day program. It's on site. We have one in LA, one in New York, one in London, one in Barcelona. So wherever you live, there's probably one close to you. Ask me about it afterwards. If you want to get started, just put your foot into the swimming pool that is virtual production. Now's the time.
And then for me, like seeing something interesting with the industry too, with this specific sort of idea and this just sort of new technology is, until now we've kind of been like working on trying to get the technology to work efficiently, the technicalities of it. And I feel we've reached a point where now it's time, sort of like why I kind of compared like the adolescence, to now explore like what it is personally, creatively. And I think it's up to us creatives. Like my backgrounds I come from a creative background. I studied architecture, and from there I moved to visual effects. And then that's when I made the transition to virtual production. And I noticed that something that I think is growing now at this sort of phase is we're starting to get more creatives to understand the technology. And with that background, we're starting to bring back that sort of artistic value that we love in terms of like film and TV. Like the DPs that are now getting the technical practice are now being able to apply the creative flows and artwork and composition that they're doing. Same thing with the directors and the art department teams, where they're starting to flow between the technical side of everything, like the virtual world, to the practical world. And I think that's the next step of truly making this work efficiently for everyone, is to and truly expand our visual storytelling for the world.
Totally. So I guess after this, we're going to have a happy hour over in the corner. The Q&A session will take place by the bar. But if you have any questions about what it takes to build a volume, work on a volume, search one out, there's so much more that goes into it. The types of camera tracking, why you would choose one LED product over another, the budget side of things, which is a whole other beast. Please let me know. I'm on the Meptik side, and we're happy to help answer any questions about what it takes to build one of these from scratch, or, modify any existing tools you have and incorporate it into a bigger overall.
Unreal Engine, 2.5D, driving plates. Ask us about all those things.
And we have a QR code here. If you'd like to know more, there is a much more in-depth document that walks you through all of the different tools, the different techniques, technologies. I'd encourage you to download it, take a look. And again, any questions you have, we'll be here to answer for you. Thank you, guys.